Crisis hit Venezuela has suffered another setback. Dozens of pro-government protesters have stormed the opposition-controlled National Assembly in Caracas. A number of politicians and journalists are said to have been wounded. Events unfolded as embattled President Nicolás Maduro spoke at a military parade to commemorate Independence Day in another part of the capital. At least 90 people have died in violent clashes at near-daily demonstrations in the past 3 months. Opponents of the leader are calling for general elections and solutions to the country's financial woes. Both the government and the opposition blame each other for the fighting.
MEPs have backed an EU deal to cooperate more closely with Cuba. The agreement envisages closer economic ties, but some parliamentarians raise concerns about the government's human rights record. It comes as US President Donald Trump is taking a tougher line on the communist-ruled country. Not condemning the US embargo against the island is completely against history and out of date. It's been done at almost all multilateral organisations and also here in the EU Parliament. It's an embargo that's just harming the Cuban people, as well as many EU companies, due to their extraterritorial dimension. However, the deal will need to be ratified by all 28 EU governments before it can be fully implemented.
North Korea's July 4th intercontinental missile launch has produced a warning from the United States, which says it's ready to use force if need be to stop Pyongyang's nuclear missile program. At an emergency UN Security Council meeting, Washington's ambassador said North Korea's actions were quickly closing off the possibility of a diplomatic solution.
It is a dark day because yesterday's actions by North Korea made the world a more dangerous place. Their illegal missile launch was not only dangerous, but reckless and irresponsible.
Moscow's envoy was more even-handed in his apportioning responsibility for the heightened tensions. We call upon the DPRK as a voluntary political decision to declare a moratorium on the testing of nuclear explosive devices and the testing of ballistic missiles, though the US and the Korean Republic at the same time should refrain from conducting full-scale joint training exercises. The recent North Korean launch was a major step in its missile program, showing it can reach parts of mainland America. Leader Kim Jong-un says he will not negotiate with the US unless it abandons its hostile policy towards his country.
The USA's at times difficult relationship with Germany and China appears to be prompting a warming of ties between the two countries. This despite Berlin's concerns over human rights issues and market access. We want a fast agreement on investments that one day could lead to a free trade agreement with China, said Chancellor Angela Merkel. Chinese President Xi Jinping added, we need to have open and innovative cooperation. We want to intensify our cooperation in the areas of trade and economy, finance and investments, but also in the fight against terrorism, together. The Chancellor and President took some time out ahead of what are likely to be taxing talks at the G20 summit in Hamburg. China has loaned 2 giant pandas to Germany, and Merkel was formally introduced to this furry fellow as the pair opened a new exhibit at Berlin Zoo.
Estonia, which has taken over the EU presidency, has urged fellow member states to do more on defence. The EU has been seeking to cooperate more deeply on security and military matters, a move that has gathered pace with Brexit on the horizon. Estonian PM Jüri Ratas spoke to the European Parliament.
In the 21st century, we must not accept aggression against a European country or the illegal annexation and occupation of part of its territory. I believe that it is not impossible that one day in the future a Ukraine president may stand in front of this House in the same role as I am today.
Cooperation between the EU and NATO will be a top priority for the Baltic country during its time in the hot seat. It shares a border with Russia. Some worry, however, it could lead to the militarisation of the EU.
What we need is a stabilization in the countries outside of the European Union and our neighbour countries. And I think that a stronger defence union and also pressure on the eastern countries is not good for stabilization.
Estonian officials say they want to agree on the funding model for planned EU battle groups by the end of the year.
Celebrations as Benghazi is declared liberated from Islamist militants. The announcement came from military strongman Khalifa Haftar, head of the self-styled Libyan National Army. After a 3-year campaign, victory would mark a major advance for the man who was once a commander in Colonel Gaddafi's forces. He said on television that the eastern city would now enter a new era of security, peace, reconciliation, harmony, reconstruction and a return to homes. Haftar has backing from foreign powers including Egypt and the United Arab Emirates, but his forces, which have suffered heavy losses in the battle for Benghazi, are not allied to Libya's UN-backed government. This resident is already talking about the liberation of all of Libya. God is great, she says. God bless our army and Khalifa Haftar. Congratulations for the victory. Despite her joy, Libya remains deeply divided, with rival powers still vying for control 6 years after Gaddafi's fall. As for Field Marshal Haftar, critics say his aim is to set up a military regime.
At stake.
Russia, Turkey and Iran have failed to reach a deal on setting up 4 de-escalation zones in Syria during talks in Kazakhstan. The failure is a setback for Moscow, the main architect of the plan, as it seeks to take the lead in efforts to end the Syrian war. The Syrian government's chief negotiator blamed Turkey for the lack of progress.
Contrary to the positive standpoint taken by all the parties except by the Turkish delegation, there has been an indication that the Turkish policy towards Astana process has been a negative policy.
Meanwhile, on the ground in Syria, the battle to recapture the city of Raqqa from self-styled Islamic State is continuing. About 2,500 militants are still said to be in Raqqa, which was declared by Islamic State to be their capital in 2014. Video taken by Syrian forces is said to show locals trying to escape the fighting. At least 100,000 are still said to be trapped in the city.
A national tribute to the French politician, women's rights campaigner and Holocaust survivor Simone Veil, who died last week aged 89. President Emmanuel Macron, past French leaders and several European heads of government attended a sombre ceremony in Paris. The European Parliament's first elected president, Simone Veil, is best known in France for getting abortion legalized when she was health minister in the 1970s. Her struggle for an end to the sordid and deadly conditions in which abortions were carried out, but also against the social hypocrisy which fostered them, is fully part of our modern history. She loved and always defended Europe because she knew that at the heart of this European dream there was, above all, this dream of peace and freedom for which she battled so hard. She didn't make forgiving or forgetting the persecutors the condition for this reconciliation, far from it. She was determined that remembrance be observed so that the unimaginable does not happen again, not to diminish the horror. President Macron announced that Veil, a Jewish survivor of the Nazi death camps at Auschwitz-Birkenau and Bergen-Belsen, would be laid to rest in the Pantheon in Paris with her late husband. The mausoleum's reserved for great and glorious figures in French history, including Voltaire and Victor Hugo.
"24 people have been arrested in a Europe-wide operation targeting the Neapolitan mafia, Spanish police say. The alleged members of the Camorra were detained on charges of drug trafficking and money laundering. A spokesperson for the Spanish Civil Guard said 14 arrests were made in Spain, 8 in Italy and 2 in Germany. In addition to the roundup, searches are being carried out in Barcelona, northeastern Spain. Police claim the mafia used gambling dens, car rental companies and gold buying and selling shops to launder money from drug trafficking.
Televidente, non sta vai un break e ora non sta back e deporta con nostro collega Carl Reuter.
Juice Bar, para comer salud e beber salud. Para juice natural nutritivo, Juice Bar. Para smoothies e prato com fruta e verdura fresco, Juice Bar.